Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of the show. He is Greg Smith. I'm Zack Carpenter, the publisher of Inside Nebraska, and we'll just get right to it with no dilly-dallying. Breaking news this morning, Friday morning, April 28th, quarterback Casey Thompson entered the transfer portal. Just so I have a lot of thoughts to share, Greg, but just so I stop rambling and riffing, just take it away with instant reaction, instant thoughts.
Yeah, I think my instant reaction is that it's weird, man. It's not a huge surprise given the big picture of what's kind of happening with Nebraska's quarterback situation. And I say that because we saw Casey Thompson miss the entire spring due to injury or recovering from surgery, offseason surgery. Jeff Sims had the opportunity as, by the way, kind of the hand-picked quarterback for Matt Rule and Marcus Satterfield, had the opportunity to go through an entire spring. They got to kind of tailor the offense around him and his skill set, as well as the other quarterbacks that were out there. And then Casey Thompson, right after spring, you see kind of the videos of him throwing, and you don't know, man, is this, him saying, okay, I'm ready for my big comeback at Nebraska, or is this him saying, I'm ready to throw, like, let me off the leash so I can go transfer? And maybe it seems like the latter. And so I say all this, it was not a huge shock and surprise that Casey decided to enter. And a part of that is a little bit of context about knowing how much Satterfield and Rule really seem to like Jeff Sims.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about this on March 20th, the opening of spring ball,
Mm.
I think this would have been a total and complete shock bombshell. And this is something
Yes.
I wrote about earlier today. There's almost no such thing as a bombshell transfer in today's world of college
Right.
football. Fast moving, everybody it seems like is at least a candidate in some capacity to be
You just
a,
never
a
know.
transfer. You just never know. But I mean, this is close to it. Maybe not a bombshell, but in that vicinity. But like I said, on March 20th, if you're using that date, I think it would have been a complete and total shock. But as we sit here, April 28th, it's not quite as shocking just because I think there were rumblings that this could potentially happen in the background. As like you said, Casey Thompson was I don't want to say he wasn't given a fair shake, but he just wasn't out there. He wasn't able to participate fully
Yeah.
and show what he has in spring ball. But he did have almost the entire 2022 season, 10 out of 12 games that Matt Rule, Marcus Satterfield, the staff evaluated, and compare that with, again, Jeff Sims with how he's taken the reins of the quarterback competition. That was the number one question I had coming into spring ball was how much of a foothold could Jeff Sims get on the starting quarterback job, because I think all of us thought this quarterback battle does not start officially until fall camp, but it can start unofficially, and Sims could make a strong case. And apparently, he made a stronger case than we probably could have anticipated when spring ball started.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, and this is not, it's interesting because in this discussion, I think you have to talk some about Jeff Sims and the skills that he brought to the table to kind of force this move. Because I don't think it's out of bounds to say that if Casey Thompson really felt like he was going to be the starter at Nebraska, he'd still be at Nebraska or would not be in the portal. I don't think that that's a huge stretch to say. We saw what happened with Jeff Sims in the spring game. I think I don't want to speak for all of the staff, but I think we were pleasantly surprised at how he looked in the spring game based on kind of the uneven things that you heard out of spring football, I guess is a good way to describe it, about his ability to pass the football. You know what he looks like, big kid, looks the part. You know he can run. He made had a great rushing touchdown in that game. But I thought the throws to me were the thing that was what was going to allow Casey Thompson to make up ground. But if Jeff Sims progressed through the spring as a passer, and the coaches think that they can continue to work with that and get him to the point he needs to be, then I think that, yeah, it makes sense that he enters fall camp or enters the summer as the clear-cut number one. And maybe it's a situation where the Matt Rule has not seemed to want to, like, fake bring up drama, right? He has not been like drumming up controversies where they aren't needed necessarily for the football team for like motivation or anything like that. And what if it is a situation where, if he wanted Jeff Sims to be the guy and he thought that he was going to be, maybe it's best to just go ahead and make all of that known to everyone involved right now versus dragging it out just for the sake of saying that we have a quarterback competition.
Yeah, I think that's the number one thing to hone in on here, and number one takeaway because there are a lot of people asking why. Like why had
Right.
he decide to enter the portal? And um like you say, I mean that's what this not trying to spin zone this at all. Like because I think that this move really it's a big hit on the quarterback depth because Jeff Sims he's been known to get injured throughout his time at Georgia Tech. If he's going to be running the ball as often as we think he might, like not Adrian Martinez style, but
All right.
if he's going to be used in this Satterfield.
It'll be in the game plan.
Yep, absolutely. And I mean, we saw it at the spring game that he's going to find himself loose for scramble throws and probably used in that zone read running game. But I mean, you lose such a valuable veteran piece, and in Casey Thompson, that if I mean if he would have been your number two quarterback, you feel pretty damn good going into the season if you have those two guys. But I mean, for him personally, why? I mean, if you go into fall camp and you lose that quarterback competition, then you're not going to. It's going to hurt to be sitting there on the sidelines. But that is, to your point, I think that's what this does is helps eliminate that quarterback controversy. Any talk of it going into the summer, any talk of it during fall camp, I mean, that would have been far and away the number one storyline. Um,
Oh
and
yeah.
for a good reason, going into fall camp, throughout fall camp. I mean, it would
Yeah.
have been one of the first questions. Um, just about every rule of Satterfield press conference is how are
How
Sims,
how are you splitting those reps?
yeah, and that
Yep.
eliminates all of it. So the sole focus is Jeff Sims. I mean, he's the unquestioned QB1, unquestioned starter going into the summer and fall camp now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think now you kind of end up in a situation with what they have right now. As of recording this, they still have Heinrich Harburg, they still have Chuba Purdy in the program. Logan Smothers, as we reported, has obviously entered the portal, but as we also reported, the door is actually open for him to return. And the one key thing that I want to make sure to bring up, kind of in that, and it dovetails perfectly with talking about those four that are potentially going to be in the room, but the three also that are currently in there for sure, is that I feel like they all fit more of what Nebraska seems to be looking for in quarterbacks. These are guys that can run and throw, are all dual threat guys. Now, to various degrees about the throwing abilities for each of those quarterbacks, and I think they all have work to do with that. But they all are very good athletes, right? I think that that's something that matters to Matt Rule and Marcus Satterfield. And I think what we're seeing right now, after some departures, namely with Richard Torres and Casey Thompson, is you're seeing a resetting of the quarterback room where everyone has a similar skill set. Like, it's no longer like this mismatched room of like, hey, you've got like a big pocket passer in Richard Torres, but then you've also got a smaller pocket passer in Casey Thompson. Oh, but you've got Logan Smothers and you've got you know what I mean? Like, at some point, and this is what happens around college football with good teams, your quarterback room needs to look in a similar fashion. Like, I think that that's something that needs to be said about what's happening too. And that could have also been another kind of reason behind what's happening right now, is that Matt Rule and Marcus Satterfield look at that room and say, we don't want to have to design multiple game plans if one guy goes down, or if we need to have a package or anything like that. We want this thing to look the same, and there's value in having that continuity.
No, that's a really good point. Honestly, that's not something that had crossed my mind in the hours since this the transfer decision from Thompson um, had been relayed to us. I mean, that you see that at the NFL level, right? Like you get a backup in there who has a similar skill set to the starter, but like the drop off in in talent level is significant, but and you probably could find a more of a dynamic quarterback, number two quarterback, but the changes in the offense on a fly, like if quarterback goes down mid second quarter, then you have to completely change your game plan. And I think it's a continuity thing. It's a system thing, right? Where if you have all of the quarterbacks, like you said, all lined up with the same uh, similar styles, that the stuff they bring to the table, it allows you to run your offense, have that more of that continuity going into game day, where you're going to be able to install or keep running. Obviously not the same game plan with a guy like Chuba Purdy or Heinrich Harburg that you would with Jeff Sims, but maybe a scaled back version of that playbook if an injury were to happen. But going forward, I mean, I'll set the table. I want to talk about just real quickly the rest of the transfers that we've had going in the portal before we wrap up here. But any last thoughts on Casey Thompson, Jeff Sims, the quarterback situation?
This sets up also one of the things that sets up for Jeff Sims. We saw him at the spring game in his post game press conference. He sounded like a guy that'll be in the mix to be a captain, right? Like he talked about how great things had been going here in Nebraska, about the fan base and all of that. He sounded like a guy ready to kind of take hold and seize of the football team. It clears the way for that, right? And I think that also is something that it feels like it's a down the line thing, but it's not really. When you hear so much about Casey Thompson being around the facility, and you know that he had teammates that really respected him and liked him, like sometimes that can be really difficult to manage on your football team as you're trying to get everybody pushing in the same direction. So that's just another wrinkle in this. So I'm curious to see how Jeff Sims then kind of takes up that leadership mantle as we now move forward with him as the clear-cut QB1.
Yeah, and that's the final point I wanted to touch on. I mean, I think we need to do Casey Thompson. I think we need to do him some justice here. Like, he became a fan favorite because he's one of the best, most accomplished Nebraska quarterbacks that they've had in quite a long time. I mean, he threw for over 4,000 yards. What was the final tally? I don't want to say 4,000. Then that's crazy, because I think that number might have been a common. Yeah, that was a combination of his time at Texas. I'd got some numbers mixed up because the 4,000 total was combined time at I think Texas and Nebraska. So 1 year at Nebraska, he completed 173 of 274 passes, 2,400 yards, a little over 2,400 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 5 rushing touchdowns. I mean, the passing yards mark is 7th, and passing touchdowns is 10th in program history for a single season, and just the 5th Nebraska quarterback to ever have 3 300-yard passing games in a single season, and finished in the top 15 nationally in passing yards per completion and passing yards per attempt, 29th in passing efficiency. So, I mean, he put Nebraska in situations to win last year. I mean, that connection between him and Trey Palmer was absolutely electric. And it's a big reason.
F it, Trey down there somewhere.
Yeah, that's always going to be a great moment. I mean, and I mean, that connection between the two is a big reason why Trey Palmer is about to get drafted. And in this weekend's NFL draft, his speed and talent was on display because he had a guy who could throw him the ball for that the long touchdown against Indiana that wound up being the game winner, the game sealer, the touchdown, the 87-yard touchdown against Iowa, the Purdue game. It was that Casey Thompson to Trey Palmer connection that was I think by far the most exciting part of the season, from during a 4-8 down year with so much swirling around the program. But you could always, I feel like, except for Illinois, when Palmer was matched up with Devon Witherspoon, who was the number 5 overall pick in the NFL draft last night. It's like, all right, he held him to 1 catch for like only a couple yards. So I think that was like the only or one of the only games where those two didn't bring something exciting and electric to the table and game changing to the table. And Casey, he became a fan favorite because he was tough as hell. Like he's tough as nails, just standing into the pocket, taking multiple sacks almost every game, taking multiple hard hits in the pocket every game. And we would always say in the press box, like, all right, well, is this going to be the game where he takes a hit and he doesn't get up? But every time, almost every time he got up, even if he was down on the field for a while, he would get up and come back into the game until that Illinois game when he suffered the nerve damage or the nerve injury. So I think it's a hard pill to swallow, I think, for, like you said, a lot of the guys in that locker room, a lot of his teammates, and a lot of fans around here. But I mean, we've just been trying to explain the move, not necessarily spin zone it in a positive way, but now we're looking at the Jeff Sims era to pretty much officially begin as we head into the summer.
Yeah.
But the last thing was just, there's now, to update everyone, there's 10 players in the transfer portal from the spring period. There were 11 scholarship players during the winter transfer period, 10 in the spring. Quarterbacks, obviously, Casey Thompson, Logan Smothers, and Richard Torres. Receivers, Alante Brown, Sean Hardy II, Victor Jones Jr., tight end James Carney, defensive back Braxton Clark, and defensive back Noah Pola Gates. And then the big surprise, other than Thompson, would be defensive lineman Stephon Wynn Jr., who went into the portal earlier this week. So they're at 90. Nebraska's now at 90 scholarships total, trickling down to that 85 number that they need to be at the start of the season in August. But we're going to see, I think, more attrition over the next couple of days and in the summer going forward. But any thoughts on any of those guys, or just the transfer situation as a whole?
Yeah, it has not been Nebraska hasn't had any huge, really bad, you thought this guy was going to be a top line starter departures, except for Casey Thompson, because he was in line to obviously be the starting quarterback. But even as we've talked about, that one, you can understand why that one would happen. Quarterback's a little bit unique. So if it stays that way, I think Nebraska will be in pretty good shape. Like you said, they still have got to get 5 or so scholarships down, and maybe 1 or 2 additional ones if they, if somebody pops that in the portal that Nebraska would like to bring in. But yeah, it's going to be interesting though, because one thing I also want to note while we're here is that just kind of looking at the different messages that guys have put out when they decide to leave the program and move on, it has not been very oh yeah, these guys cut me or anything like that. And it can be really tough. This whole portion of this, and we knew it was coming. And you knew that spring was going to kind of be an audition for a lot of guys. It's kind of like the ugly underbelly of college football, even though it's more and more out there now with the portal. You've seen guys be very gracious and thankful of this current coaching staff. And I don't know what that means yet. I'm not saying it means anything huge as of right now. I'm just saying put a pin in that to kind of see what that means moving forward for how these guys build a team, because we've seen them in the past, Matt Rule, build really strong bonds within teams. And I wonder how that will manifest itself here. And if that's part of why we're seeing some of the messages with outgoing players, or even guys who decided to leave before this. I always think about Garrett Nelson saying how this staff embraced him and helped him train for the NFL draft and were there for anything that, they needed. And they didn't have to do that because he wasn't going to play for them. And because he had already made that decision, not because, he hated them or anything like that. And so it's just something that I just noticed as we've gone along the way. Of course, I'll say that, and I've now jinxed myself, and someone will now come out and slam the staff on Twitter because that's my luck.
Right. I mean, it's a mixture too of those transfers. I mean, you have young guys and old guys. I mean, you have Richard Torres, who was only set to enter his 2nd year in the program, and Braxton Clark, who was getting ready for his 6th year in the program. So it's
right.
And then Stephon Wynn Jr., who was entering the portal twice after coming over from Alabama. So it's a mixture of different situations, and I'm sure we're going to be seeing more attrition here down the road. Soon, whether it's sooner or later, it'll be happening, and it's needed attrition because of a numbers standpoint. But we'll be having reports and analysis on all of that at nebraska.rivals.com. And we'll be back here again, probably Monday or Tuesday on the Inside Nebraska YouTube channel. So I encourage you guys to like this video, subscribe to our page so you can get those videos dropped directly into your feed. So for Greg Smith, I'm Zack Carpenter, and we'll catch you guys again next time.